Hello YouTube, Mike Wogman here, Mushroom Rangers. Part 1, Petri dish for long-term culture storage. I'm going to go over the pluses and the minuses of the Petri dish. I would say the Petri dish is probably one of the best universal tools in mushroom cultivation, because you can grow out your culture on agar, and not only can you see contaminants, but if you have contaminants, what you can do is you can isolate away from the contaminants to a different petri dish, saving your culture or your strain. So I want to go into first the positives of the petri dish. The positives of the petri dish, again, is you can actually see the mycelium growing across the plate, whether it's one that doesn't have perforations or one that's just pretty much has no walls and is just a regular old petri dish. They're easy to store. If you wrap them well with parafilm, they're breathable. They store for at least a year to a year and a half, so that's a good thing. You can always use them as your masters, so if you want to preserve your culture, all you need to do is just cut a little wedge like that out, put it onto a new petri dish and let it grow out, and you still have the genetics of the parent mushroom that you cloned from, or if you bought it from a reputable source. Now the negatives. The negatives is they're made of plastic, so they're kind of fragile. They can crack. They do sometimes over time get filled full of condensation, so your mycelium will be wet on top. So when you pull your petri dish out of whatever kind of storage facility you have, I have them in my refrigerator in a tote. So when I pull them out, I don't know if you can see that little bit of water right there. It doesn't hurt the mycelium. It just makes a little bit of mess when you try to open it, and then you try to take a little wedge out and transfer it to a different petri dish. Then you have to dump the water out. Another negative to petri dishes is if it's a certain species, like a cold, temperature loving species, sometimes what will happen is they'll actually grow mushrooms off the agar. So you'll, especially lion's mane does this a lot. Like you'll have little lion's manes on there, and blue oyster does that too. They'll start to grow across the, like once they start, sort of the mycelium starts triggering itself, it's running out of food, it'll start producing fruiting body, and then it'll start to grow out in and around the parafilm. So you're gonna have to watch out for that. Another downside to this is, to pour these, you have to have a flow hood. There's no in or buts about it. You have to have a flow hood, and you have to have a pressure cooker to sterilize your agar. So what you're gonna do is you're gonna pressure sterilize your agar, let it cool down, and then come over and pour the agar into your petri dishes one by one, and let it sit in front of your flow hood to cool down. But all in all, I would say it's about 78 to 22 positive to negative. So that's one way you can store your cultures long term. And again, even if you lose your cultures, if it gets contaminated, you always have a backup to come back to. So again, it's an easy way to store them. They're lightweight, however, they're fragile. They collect condensation, but still, it's still a good tool to have in your arsenal when you're trying to keep your cultures alive for long term. So I highly recommend these for your first long-term storage. So this is part 1. In the next video, I'll go over liquid cultures. Liquid cultures is going to actually, if you do it right or if you order it, it's going to either encompass ordering something through the mail or using this, taking a piece of wedge of mycelium out and put it into a liquid blank and then propagating it into a liquid culture. So again, that's the first way that you can keep your cultures long term to about a year and year and a half. After about a year and a half, you're going to want to take it out, put it onto a Petri dish, and again, see how viable it is. If it runs slow, then what you might want to do is you're going to pick a nice aesthetically pleasing mushroom to clone onto a blank agar dish, and then once you transfer away from that, if there's no contaminants, then that becomes your new master, and then you can store it long term with your Petri dish. So part 1, Petri dish. Next part, liquid culture. So if you like this video, like, subscribe, comment, tell yourself, tell your friends. Blessed be, and